For this entry, I wanted to take a few moments to look at three of the main writing styles when we talk of prose. Well, actually, I shouldn't say writing styles, I should say points of view. Those being the first-person limited, the third-person limited, and the third-person omniscient. Now, each of these have their strong points and their weak points. And there are many examples that I could probably state of each type. At least my observations are correct. The first one being the first-person limited. Now that is when the story is written from the point of view of the storyteller. And you basically get their thoughts, their conclusions about what they see. You don't get anything else. You don't get what is this person thinking. You don't get anything other than basically what the protagonist, the story subject, thinks. Myself, I've had some challenges with that. But there are authors who have done very well with the first-person limited. Jim Butcher being one, since his complete Dresden Files, every story is literally from a first-person point of view, mostly from the point of view of the protagonist, Harry Dresden. The second type, and I think this is the one most of my works tend to follow, is the third-person limited. That is when you take the point of view of a character, but you don't use terms like I. This is very handy, say, if you're opening with a setting and then going into the character. Third-person limited allows you to glimpse into the person's mind, but when you look at another person, you don't know what they're thinking. You don't have any idea what they're thinking. This tends to be the most common, I think, of the viewpoints, because look at all the Star Trek novels, probably the Star Wars novels. I haven't read any of them. The three Myst books that were done as an accompaniment to the game series. Look at Harry Potter. Even that is done pretty much from a third-person limited perspective. But there is some offshoots to that. But actually, no, Harry Potter is not really third-person limited if I think about it. But it is basically what you see. Usually with third-person limited, you will see a break between when there's a switching of characters. And this is common because most times when you're doing third-person limited, you stick with one character until you want to switch to another one. But again, you're limited to what they think about what they see in a person. I mean, you could look at a person and think they're completely trustworthy, which is how it should be. And then when you go to that person's point of view, they're plotting how they're going to betray this person. That is the difference, the key difference between the third-person limited. You only get the point of view of whom you are doing it from. The last type is third-person omniscient. And this gives a whole bunch of leeway. You are observing it as a third person, but you're not necessarily limited to the person that's speaking at the time. Third-person limited, omniscient. Basically, you can get a feeling about what everybody thinks at any given time. most likely you will focus on the protagonists, but you will also be able to get glimpses into the mind of your antagonists and everything. When I said Harry Potter seems more third-person limited, and then I said, actually, no, I don't think so. Harry Potter, the whole book series, J.K. Rowling, has the feel of third-person limited, but it's actually third-person omniscient. Because you're given clues on how other characters are thinking at all times. If it was just limited to Harry Potter, you would just get his thoughts on everything. But there are several examples. For example, the first chapter in the first book, the first chapter in the fourth book, the first two chapters in the sixth book, and the first chapter in the seventh book. Those are all basically from someone else's perspective other than Harry. And it's presented in the case where you get the feeling of certain characters in the story. First chapter of the first book, Vernon Dursley, and then you go into Albus Dumbledore and Minerva McGonagall. In the first two chapters of the sixth book, you have the Prime Minister and his interactions with Cornelius Fudge and Rufus Scrimgeour. And in the next one, it is pretty much Severus Snape and Narcissa Malfoy and Bellatrix Lestrange. These aren't Harry Potter, but they give to the feeling, and you get insights on how they think. So, in a way, Harry Potter is third-person omniscient. Another example, the Lemony Snicket series of Unfortunate Events series. That's third-person omniscient, because actually you're getting... That one's a hard one to call. It's the story being told of the Baudelaire orphans, Violet, Klaus, and Sunny. But it's being told by Lemony Snicket, and it's done in such a way that it seems like he's writing the story and he's interjecting. But in turn, it's also third-person omniscient, although because you're getting insights into characters that he could not say was happening, what they were thinking. So, it does feel, that series does feel third-person omniscient. Look at the Discworld series. You could read that, and you jump from character to character, not even seeing where a page break or anything like that happens. If the characters are in the same area, you could jump between them, get their thoughts at any time. But if they're in separate areas, oh, well, there's a break in the action. So, authors use these perspectives, and we should use them too. We have to learn how to use them well. Key thing, first person, use of I a lot as the talker. Whereas in third person, you will always see he, she, person's name. It's always the same, or it's always different. You get that feeling. But myself, I tend to prefer using third person limited and third person omniscient, because in some ways, depending on the story, it helps hold the character in. It makes you think you're the outside observer and you can experience everything. If you do it in first person limited, you get a feel for the character, but you wonder about other characters, what they were thinking, what was going on in their heads. You only get the inference of what the storyteller tells. And in some cases this is a good thing, in some cases it's not necessarily a good thing. Like for like a detective noir type thing, that first person limited is terrific. First person limited is very terrific. If you're trying to put off a story that you're watching it from the point of view of the character and make it a mystery sense, and oh my gosh, the big reveal. The character you've been watching as, going through this is, they're the killer. They're the bad guy. They're the ultimate evil. That's a terrific plot device, if you ask me, because the whole time you're playing, you're wondering what's going on. Or, reading, you're wondering what's going on. Third person limited is very, very good for like dramatic things, but you want to switch like to third person omniscient if you get into a fight sequence, like in an action story, because you're trying to follow all this action. If you limit it to the characters, it's very hard to do a detailed fight scene because you're only limited to what they're thinking. It can be done, but it's tricky. I'll admit that that's a tricky thing. But, and I'm going to stress this, if you're writing something, try and decide what perspective you want to use before you go into it, because if you choose one path and it's not working out, you have to do a serious rewrite. Especially if you're going from like, oh, first person is not working on the third person. It's not so much of a serious thing if you're going third person, limited to third person. Omniscient, you just have to make sure your switches are clear. Because if you don't do that clearly, people get puzzled. That's my advice. I hope you found this interesting. And if you want to hear more, please subscribe. I'll try and do more of these. I have a bunch of others out there on all sorts of topics. And I might be getting into other things to present as well. Take care.